readings from Deuteronomy chapter 30, verses 15 to 20. See, I have set before you today life and prosperity, death and adversity. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I am commanding you today, by loving the Lord your God, walking in his ways, and observing his commandments, decrees, and ordinances, then you shall live and become numerous, and the Lord your God will bless you. The Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to possess. But if your heart turns away and you do not hear, but are led astray to bow down to other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall perish. You shall not live long in the land that you are crossing the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Choose life so that you and your descendants may live, loving the Lord your God, obeying him and holding fast to him. For that means life to you and length of days, so that you may live in the land that the Lord swore to give you by your ancestors, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Please stand for the reading of the gospel. Before us now, the Holy Gospel according to St. Luke, we continue the 14th chapter. There were large crowds traveling with Jesus. And he turned to them and said to them, "Whoever comes to me and does not hate father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, even life itself, cannot be my disciple. Whoever does not carry the cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Which of you, intending to build a tower, would not first sit down and estimate the cost, to see whether you have enough to complete it? Otherwise, when you've laid the foundation and you're not able to finish, all who see it will begin to ridicule you, saying, this fellow began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king going out to wage war against another king would not first sit down and consider whether or not he is able with 10,000 to oppose the one who comes against him with 20,000? If he cannot, then while the other is still far away, he sends a delegation and asks for the terms of peace. So, therefore, none of you can become my disciples if you do not give up all of your possessions. This is the gospel of our Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. The congregation may be seated. You haven't already fallen down. I told you that Deuteronomy was easier, didn't it? I could tell you the date I could be exact about the date if you really needed me to. I remember it because I was a rookie pastor. I was in my office, and I had just finished a most important document. It was my tax return. And it was April 15th. And this year, I was going to get to the post office before midnight. I was there giving it one last look over before I went to the copy machine. Pretty handy having a copy machine at work, you know, for your own copy of your own tax return. And in walked a man who I had seen in church many times. Father of 3 girls, husband to a very faithful disciple at the church who volunteered for all kinds of things, and he was around from time to time for one thing or the next. A strong man always. Participated in worship. You think we don't watch. Participated in worship. You know, held the book, kind of sang some of the words to the songs. And he was in tears, weeping. His father was dying. We didn't know about it at all. We didn't know about it at all because he never talked about his father. Never talked to anybody about his father. And today he was going to talk to me about his father. Because he filled up the doorway, and it was pretty clear he wasn't moving until he got an answer from this pastor about what he should be doing about his father. You see, he hated his father. He actually quoted this Bible verse to me about knowing that he could become a disciple because he hated his father. He hated his father because his father had been a cruel man to him. Had beaten him when he was a child. It's just, you can imagine a terrible story here, and it probably wouldn't be as bad as he put it forward. Even though Jesus had said, hate your father, there was something in what he had picked up in being in church often enough and listening and hearing and knowing that God was about love, that he knew that he couldn't let his father die. With hate in his heart. And so there he was, ripped apart by a life of pain and a God who called him to love. What do I say to this man? That was his question for me. I didn't really care that much about my tax return at that moment. And I was, because I had stood up to greet him, I had spent about the last 10 minutes standing. And I was definitely feeling his pain. And I thought about his daughters in the pews. And I knew what I knew about this generation to generation issue about abuse, because we'd studied it. And I'd never prepared for a moment like this one. But I said to him, when you see your father, you will tell him that this pain and abuse that came to him, that he perpetrated on you, ends with you. That God's love for you is so powerful that nothing in this world can be more important. That the pain and suffering that you have goes with Christ to the cross and is finished. And that God's faithfulness will own the day. He looked at me. With all the tears that I'm holding right now. And he let them all fall. He picked up a Kleenex from the corner of my desk, wiped his eyes and blew his nose. And he said, I can do that. We really didn't get a chance to talk much about this Bible passage. We didn't get a chance for Jesus to explain what he means by the word hate. For him, it was the oddest, strangest invitation to listen to what Jesus has to say. We didn't discuss that. We didn't discuss that in Hebrew and in Greek, the word for hate is a little more lightly used, a little broader in its understanding than our ferociousness in 21st century American English. All of us know well enough that the word hate comes out of little children's mouths just because they've heard grown-ups use it, and it's the only full expression of their frustration that they can manage at the moment without kicking you. Which you won't allow them to do. If you grew up in a household like mine, it was one of those words that got some soap on your tongue. Here it is coming out of Jesus' mouth.
toward your father and mother. And there's a whole commandment about that. I mean, that deserves some explanation, doesn't it? But he doesn't give it to us. Instead, he goes on talking about how costly it is to build a tower. These are the crowds that are following him. He's talking about construction. As if he was at a contractor's dinner. And then to make it worse, he talks about kings waging wars with armies. As if he sat down with kings at the United Nations or something. Count the cost. Count the cost of being a disciple. The cost for this man of being a disciple was he had to give up his hate. He had to. And he did it freely. Because he knew, and now this is the sweetest piece of this, because he knew, and I really invite you to consider this, he knew that Jesus had, and he believed that Jesus had, freely given it up. When we're invited by Moses in Deuteronomy to follow God, this invitation doesn't come along with love your neighbor as yourself. Oh yeah, it's still in the books of Moses. But it's about following God today. It's about making this choice as you get ready to go into the promised land. This is Moses' last sermon. Read through the book of Deuteronomy. That's how long a last sermon should last. That's why all the other ones are shorter. Moses is begging the people to remember who got them there, who got them out of slavery in Egypt, who gives them the rules, the regulations, the ordinances, the instructions on how to be a peoples, how to be a nation. You have to do these things in order to be this way. And look at how our instructions begin. Listen to them, because they invite you to love God, who gives you everything. And no other place, no other true thing could be as firm as this. Of course, we always take that idea about loving God and putting God first. And quite frankly, you can make a good argument that any commandment violation, even the one to love your neighbor as yourself, any commandment violation is really a violation of loving God. Because God made all that is and all who are. And whether they're in our particular clan or tribe or faith or nation or peoples, they're all loved. What are you willing to let go of? Is what Jesus is saying. For this love. Because this love isn't going to make you hate your mother and father. This love isn't going to make you turn away from brother and sister or husband and wife. This love isn't going to make you do anything hateful. The way we use the word hate. It isn't going to make you do that. It isn't going to call you to do that. It is going to call you to let go of the things that really belong to God. And to see that God's love is greater than any loss we have. The cost to be alive for this man who stood in my office door. And made a brilliant testimony. His cost was to give up this sense of rightness. That his father was evil and wicked. This pain that he lived with. This thing that would have possessed him had he not had a few words of clarity here and there, and been able to see a hope, and been able to long for, and know that there must be something better. And that's why here in the 14th chapter of Luke, more than halfway to Jerusalem, more than halfway to that cross, more than halfway to marching straight into a place where religion is bent for political purposes, and politics uses religion to maintain control and order, and all this must be overthrown, and it will cost Jesus his life, the Son of God. When Jesus says you must pick up your cross and carry it, it's not clip art like on the front of the bulletin. Everybody knows exactly what a cross is. Everybody knows exactly this technique of execution. Everybody who has an ounce of curiosity has witnessed. And now are so vilely disgusted by the brutality of their conquerors that they must turn their heads away. Sometimes when they enter the city gates, so that they will not see power that demands obedience. That's hate. Instead, they will see power that suffers in order to redeem. Suffers not just pain and death, but a complete divine indignity. Can you bear that? Because God is bearing it on our behalf. To the crowds on that day who who are following Jesus, they're so excited about God with us. He warns them where it goes. And he invites them to count the cost. And it may be that our possessions, our selfishness, our vanities, our desires, our goals, our dreams, our hopes, maybe our fears, our past, maybe they all need to be left at the side of that road on this walk to Jerusalem. Maybe they need to be set down in places where they can be left behind. In generations to come that don't know hate. In places that can live and breathe a love that God is dying to show us and rising to show us. To say all this is happening in these words of Jesus right now, I think is the best way for our ears to hear this gospel. Because if we count the cost and decide to follow, we're not doing it out of obedience. We're doing it out of our own choice. We're doing it out of receiving an invitation to love through all things, the worst, and the things that charm us the most. And we will know who we are. Amen. Let's stand and sing our hymn of the day. Come and follow me.